My name's Dave Johnson. I've been a pharmacist for 1 or 2 years. I'll actually show this on here. Came here, opened up the pharmacy for them here on a request, and hopefully I can impart some knowledge on you tonight. Hopefully I can learn something from you too, or you can stump me. I always go for stumping. There's a radio program that has a show, it's a talk show, it's called Stump the Dummies. I will volunteer to be the dummy. Try to stump me. So again, Grand Itasca Pharmacy, we're located right inside the front door of the hospital. Opened our doors in 2014, December. That was about an 8-year process for this community. The community had been asking for a pharmacy in that building from the time it opened. And it's politics. I mean, I will tell you plain and simple, semi-politics, because you had Reed Drug and Globe Drug in town. They were locally owned pharmacies, and you really don't like to compete against locally owned pharmacies if you can avoid it. I don't want to call it unfair competition, but it's competition that's not needed in the town. They were both sold out to corporations, so they were no longer locally owned. So then the hospital made the decision. I came from a community, previously I was in Crosby at Cuyuna Regional, and we had the same situation. We had put a pharmacy, a retail pharmacy in our hospital clinic, and we had 2 pharmacies in town, and only after one of those pharmacies in town had closed had we made that decision that we would open up a pharmacy. And we actually we worked with them and said no compete. And not necessarily here, but we never tried to compete with pharmacies. We just tried to be a service for the patients. That's our goal. I really do felt privileged. I'm very happy. Sue Skinner was the vice president at the time that asked me if I could run this. And my response to her really at that time was, what the heck? I don't know if you realize there's multiple kinds of pharmacists. I have worked since school as a hospital pharmacist. I was last a hospital pharmacy director in Crosby. And she asked me to do this, and it's like, I'm willing to try any challenge once. But I wanted to do it like a hospital pharmacy. And you might ask, what's the difference there? And it's kind of significant. Hospital pharmacists we have a little more freedom. We work with the doctors, we round with them, and you get to make changes. They ask you questions, it's a one-on-one interaction, and that's the environment I wanted to look forward to. The clinic setting gives us that. I mean, if you're familiar where we are, internal medicine is right across the hall from us. We talk to them all the time. We talk to almost all of our physicians. We know them on a first name basis. And the beauty is we work with them and we do their bidding, but we do it in a way that we don't impede them, and it speeds their workflow processes up, and it makes life better, simpler for our patients. And that's our goal. We want it better and simpler for the patient. I'm a Brainerd native, so I'm not far from Grand Rapids, very similar communities. Graduated University of Minnesota. Go Gophers. I try. I just keep waiting for a winning year. It's kind of like the Vikings or the Wild or the Twins. I did give up on my Twins season tickets because I went to 19 games one year and I didn't see a winning game. It's like, okay, I'm not a fair weather friend, but it's like I do this. And I've been practicing for almost 35 years. I mean, that's, hopefully I get it right someday. Now, I have given talks to groups for a few years, since I got out of school. And I used to always, practice on my family. So back in the day, when I first did a talk, this is my daughter, who now is also a pharmacist. And this was her reaction to my talk. It's like, so I don't have high expectations. She has a daughter now. Aww. This was her reaction to my talk. So don't have high expectations. And if I'm not loud enough, I did wear the loud tie, so that you will. I brought a heckling crew with me. Jerry in the front over here, Deb in the back, so their goal here is to pick on me. So this is weird. One of the biggest problems that people have is managing multiple medications. And I will tell you up front, I hate medications. I'm a fan of, you should be on the fewest drugs possible or no medications at all. I'm a fan of the YMCA. You come in here and walk. You know, get your blood pressure down by walking. Eat a healthy diet. Do all that. Only when that fails, then let's now look at medications, and let's not add a lot of medications. I think, I used to work with a pharmacist who said, if 8 medications or more, you need a different doctor. That's not necessarily true, but it is a lot of times that we add medications to a profile, we don't take them away, we add new medication, which now causes a side effect that adds another medication. So it's kind of interesting that what cures us makes us sick. So I'm a fan of always reiterating that make sure you're on what you need to be on, and maybe you can stop something too. And I do have a slide that addresses that to say one option that you have, and it's not just with us, it's with most pharmacies. You would ask, am I in the wrong profession? You know, because I don't like medications. And I would say, I think it's a perfect one, because my goal is to make sure that I keep you on the straight and narrow and try to keep you on as few as meds as possible. And I'll actually show you later too, I'm pretty cheap. So I'm cost effective. One thing that's really unique about this is I like to talk to people. Debbie will tell you that. Jerry will tell you that. I like to talk to people. And it's like trying to figure out what ticks, what do you need, how can we help you? Because it is major. I mean, medications are cheap. You guys all know that. You can go in a pharmacy and walk out for $5, right? Not on this planet, you can't. I've had 2 patients in the last 2 days, each day in a row, who have $500 deductible and met it with just a couple meds. So it's not uncommon, but there are ways around that, hopefully. I don't trust our politicians to fix it for us. I will throw that out there. I don't care which side of the aisle you're on, they're not going to fix it for us. Use one pharmacy, and if possible, use one doctor. This is interesting. I had a doctor approach me in Crosby, and this was strange. He said, so I'm seeing a patient, and I have him on 3 medications. And he had talked to this patient multiple times, been in the office, asked, hey, you know, what meds are you on? And the patient would list off these 3 medications. Patient got hospitalized and found out, no, this patient was on 6 medications. Patient was seeing another doctor. They were prescribing almost exact same meds, but duplicates, not the exact same, and the patient was going to 2 different pharmacies. They were literally doubling up on their medical care and their prescriptions for no reason. And when asked, the doc said, I asked the patient, why didn't you tell me these meds? Well, you didn't write for them. No. If we ask, or a physician asks, or nurse asks what medications you're on, it's really important that we need to know everything you're on. We try to profile it all, the clinic profiles it all, and one thing is to look for drug interactions, to see that we're not counteracting something or minimizing, using one that minimizes the effect of another. It can be huge for some patients, and you're throwing money away. And again, you'll see that I'm cheap. You don't want to throw money away. Keep a list of all current medications. I don't know if anybody does that in their wallet. I mean, you walk in a doctor's office, they always ask you what meds are you on. I actually have it on my phone. It's on the first page of my phone. It lists my medications, so that if anything ever happens to me, it's right there. People can say, here's my list of meds. You can keep it in your wallet also. This is an example of like a wallet-sized piece of paper you can carry with you, fold up, and it tells you basically dosing and medications. Most pharmacies will provide this for you. If you ask them, they can print it off for you, and you can throw it in your wallet, your purse. It's very important you walk in, because you forget. I go to the doctor, they ask you, are you on this med, this med? It's like, yeah. It's like, you go walk out there, it's like, dang it, I forgot we added this one or something. And I'm no spring chicken anymore. I was very healthy, I always thought, and then I've come down to the road of, okay, threw a clot to my lungs, took out some of my lung. I now have COPD. My heart doesn't like where that clot was either, so I have some heart rate issues. So I understand where most people are coming from. I've got empathy for most patients who are on medication or have disease states, because I go through some of it. I've seen family members go through it. My mom died from cancer. My grandma died from cancer. My dad's side of the family died from heart disease. I am out there, and most pharmacists that you talk to, you'll say similar stories that they're there, they want to help you. Let them. I mean, grill them. I am going to pick on the box stores, Walgreens, CVS, and Walmart, maybe because they don't have time. Their goal is to crank through prescriptions. I'm more of a fan of, I wish Globe was open yet. I wish Reed's was open yet. Because I think the small town pharmacies will give you more time and attention. Essentia. Right now, they will give you attention over there too, and she's good. I mean, it's not a bad place, and they will give you time. Ask about taking fewer medications. MTM is medication therapy management, and it is a program where you sit with a pharmacist, and I'll cover this again, but it's a chance to actually do a one-on-one scheduled visit with a pharmacist and spend some quality one-on-one time just going over your meds. Anytime you get a medication, a lot of people don't care. You get that pamphlet, you walk out the door and say, hey, it doesn't matter to me. But ask about the side effects. Ask about what happens if I miss a dose. I'm fortunate. I take Coumadin. I miss a dose probably once or twice a year at least. It doesn't matter if Coumadin lasts long enough, but I keep a pill box. I never thought I would have one of these. The only med I care about is my Coumadin because I don't want to throw another clot ever again in my lifetime. So they're nice to have, even if you're on one medication, if it's that important. But I always ask, some medications it's not going to matter huge if you miss one dose or two. My mother-in-law had her medication stolen when we were in Norway years ago. And basically I told her, nothing you're on is going to matter the 2 weeks we're going to be in Norway. So, believing me, she went to see a doctor in Norway who told her the exact same thing. Drug interactions, so if you're starting a new drug, especially if you're using two different pharmacies, it's really important. Let them know. Let people know I'm on this also. And Debbie back there does a really good job on the hospital side. They take your drug history and they will run the interactions too on the hospital side. Beer interactions. I don't like alcohol, but I like beer. So I'm a fan of saying, does whatever you're taking, is it affected by alcohol at all? Can I have a drink with it? A common question. Can I have a drink with this? And you know, most of the time, I like beer. And that's Kavanaugh said that too, if I remember right. But I'm a fan of, I will tell you, if you can or not. There's a couple drugs that absolutely you don't want to drink beer with. You don't want to drink any alcohol with. But most cases, a single cocktail is not going to be a problem. But ask. Can I stop suddenly? There are some medications you don't want to just suddenly stop. Blood pressure meds for the most part, antidepressants, you don't want to just suddenly stop. The body needs them. We want to taper you off of them. And it could be over a 1 week period, could be 2 weeks, or it could be longer. But ask, call and ask. It's not as simple as it used to be. It used to be very simple, and I used to tell people, back when Debbie and I have worked together before, back in Brainerd, we used to tell people that called the hospital, we'd tell them, there are no dumb questions. And there's this great equalizer. Use the telephone and call the pharmacy and ask a question. You're anonymous. They don't know who you are. So there's no idea. Caller ID has kind of rendered that by the wayside. Although about 50% of my calls come from a wireless caller, so I still most of them don't know who's calling. But pick up the phone. If you got a question, call the pharmacy and ask. We're getting paid to answer that question for you. So call and ask if you got questions. You don't even necessarily have to call your own pharmacy. I've answered questions for years. Back in my early days, the most common question I ever got was, I'm home on leave, I'm heading back to base, and we were smoking pot. How long? When are you heading back? Tomorrow. Good luck. And again, use the pill box. I'm a fan. We give those away for free. A lot of places give them away for free just because it's advertising. But they work. I mean, people walk up and grab ours. We don't care. MTM, so what is it? It's medication therapy management where you make an appointment with a pharmacist. Globe Drug used to do this. I know Reed did it. Thrifty's is looking at doing it again. Walgreens does it by phone. I'm going to guess CVS Caremark does it by phone where they may call you And there's advantages to it. I mean, basically, we've done these. We sit down with you, and I tell most patients if it's an initial visit, this could be 60 minutes with you. And I have full access. If you're being seen at Gitch, I can see your whole chart. I can pull up your chart. I can read the doctor's notes. I can go through the profile and be prepared for when you walk in the door and say, here's what I know about you. I ask that you bring in meds, including over-the-counter meds, because even though you can buy something over-the-counter, you don't need a prescription for it, it's not all that safe. Taking, some of us might take 600 or 800 milligrams of ibuprofen like 4 times a day in the summer when we're bicycling a lot. That's not necessarily safe. It can be tough on the kidneys. Let us know. Let whichever pharmacist you talk to know. We actually go through all of our options that we can with you. We look at that profile, we say, a lot of times you'll find that providers will tend to, sometimes if you got high blood pressure, they'll start you out on one med, and then instead of adding or increasing the dose on that med, they'll add a second med to it. Now there's a rationale for that. The rationale is that small doses of each med decrease the side effects. And I've talked to physicians over the years, that's not what the national guidelines say, and that's not what they show. Because you want to actually maximize that dose of the first medication before you add a second medication. And that way you're actually seeing the full effect. Because you may be just under the cusp of that first medication, tweaking it a little bit may be all you need. Adding a second one, now you got 2 chances for side effects or drug interactions. You've also got, which depends on most of us and not the provider, is copays. So the one drug costs you $6, now the second one costs you $10. Now you're paying $16 a month. Changing a dose might have kept you at $6. So there's an advantage to say, can I just try a higher dose, or can we try this? And that's you. I'm, again, cheap. You're going to find us. So we do all this. We document this in a chart. Do we charge for it? Historically, we have not, but we're going to. We were with the Allina system before, and Allina didn't necessarily charge for the service. Fairview charges for it. However, IMCare, MA, and most Medicare providers will pay for the service for you. So it's a covered expense for patients. For those patients that aren't, we're actually applying for a grant. I think I shook Fairview up when I said, I'm applying for a grant for Itasca County for us to provide MTM that we basically have you fill out a one-page form and get your copay waived for MTM visit. We're going to pay for it from this grant funds. They're like, we wish we could do that. They want to do it. They can't. They're too big. We're smaller, more nimble, so we can actually say, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to go ahead. It's such a great advantage to the patient and the facility. For every $1 that you spend on a pharmacist, you can typically save $2 to $3 for the health system. So it makes more sense for us to even eat this or not take money for this, and we'll save the hospital money. And you might ask, what good does it do for you? Well, it saves you money. If you can't afford meds, this is a great time to come out and say, I can't afford these medications. Is there any alternative to this? We are very fortunate. Again, that hospital background for me came out to the fact that when you're in a hospital, a doctor might write for drug X. Well, pharmacy doesn't stock it. We stock very minimally. So we change it to drug Y. Same drug class, does the exact same thing. We got that power at Gitch where we can do that for patients. You come up to us and it's like, if it's expensive, we normally look, because if it's expensive, we don't like it. Or if you ask, and we see what else can we get covered for you, and we can actually write the order to change the drug to a different drug and try something. If a doctor is very prone or absolutely wants that drug, sometimes the insurance company needs a prior authorization. And so we'll fill out the prior auth, and that can take, in theory, 3 to 5 days to get back from an insurance company. I had one that we started it in November, and it went through 2 weeks ago. So, and I thought that was a simple one. And I don't know what the delay was, but I know it was all delay on the insurance company's side. I'm a fan of taking meds away or saying use it less often if you don't need it. So you don't always need something for forever. it's nice to challenge and say, do I still need this medication? Have I made lifestyle changes that have set me up that I don't have to be on a med anymore? There's some that you're going to be on for life, levothyroxine or thyroid drugs. You're not going to get off them. However, other ones, blood pressure meds, those can change over time. We are not tasked. This is our benefit, and this is the beauty of our pharmacy and not necessarily others, although they are in the same manner. I'm not told to make a profit. Administration has never come to me and said, you have to make money. I have to take care of patients. Whatever we need to do for a patient, we try to do it. And we actually save money in the long run, because if I keep you out of a hospital, a lot of cases, I save the hospital $10,000. I can write off $100 in drug cost at the request of a physician, and if it keeps you from being hospitalized and costing us, the hospital, $10,000, we're money ahead. So it's strange, but that's the way it works. Walmart, Walgreens, they don't make money necessarily in their pharmacy side of their business. They make it on everything else in the store. So it's to get you in the store and get you shopping for something else. One thing we did, I love this thing, I hate this thing, but I love it and hate it. We have a drug disposal box right inside the pharmacy. So instead of having to flush your drugs down the drain or throw them in the garbage, you actually bring them in, drop them in that box, and we take care of them for you. We basically, tomorrow or Friday, we're going to box up our stuff, and that box is double locked. It takes 2 different people to get into it. So we actually have the inpatient pharmacy and us work on emptying it. We seal the thing shut. We put zip ties on that are numbered so that nobody gets in there. If anybody has accessed it, somebody's going to know it's been accessed. And it goes right to an incinerator. So I do ask, and it's not a huge thing. It's like I'm not going to come slap somebody's fingers if they don't do it. We pay by the box and not by the pound. So if we can get things condensed into one bottle, it takes up less space, so it's cheaper for us. We're running about, on average, a box a month. $110 is what we pay to send this away for incineration. And that is 23 pounds typically that we have kept out of the waste stream in Itasca County. That is huge, because you're going to find this ends up in your sewer system, which ends up in the lakes and rivers. This way it goes to what's called a RCRA facility, where they burn it at a high temperature, same temperature they use to burn chemo drugs with to break them down, and scrubbers, so nothing enters the environment from this. So most pharmacies have an app. I'm a fan of saying, if you get a smartphone, use the app. This is our app. It basically is my screen. You actually can go in, order your drugs directly from your smartphone, and it tells you which ones are available to order. It tells you which ones are too soon to order, which ones are discontinued, and you may have to talk to somebody. The apps also have a neat feature. You can text us, which most people don't want to text, but yet you can send us, it's a HIPAA-compliant, encrypted message so that nobody can read it outside of you on your phone and us and our computer at work. So that, very clean way to send messages back and forth. I'm a fan of that. I know CVS advertises there, Walgreens advertises theirs. If you got the capability, use it. It is such a sweet time saver, and we don't have to be there even for you to do it. For us, at least, I'm going to guess the other sites too, it pops up immediately on our screen. You send me it's almost like a text message. To that, this thing pops on my screen, and I see so-and-so sent me a message and asked this, and I can carry on a conversation back and forth. You can send me pictures. I can send you pictures to verify something. Very nice way of doing it. Most places mail your prescriptions for free. We do that. We tell administration we mail it for free, or we want to mail out, it's for convenience. We don't want to be open on weekends. We don't have to be. We'll mail them to you. And we don't even charge you to mail them to you. So it makes life simpler. And if you use the app, you can communicate with us. We don't even have to see you, although we want to see people. At least we'd prefer to see people 4 times a year, but I'm good with sometimes once a year. Medication synchronization, I know Thrifty's does this. My mom had this through Thrifty Drug in Brainerd. It makes life simple if you can get all your medications one day. So instead of stopping in, okay, this week I gotta get this one, next week I'm gonna stop and pick up this one, I'm gonna stop and pick up another one. We can actually set it up, Thrifty's can set it up, where we time it out. All your meds are due either at 30-day intervals or 90-day intervals, and you can pick them all up. I get the fact that sometimes, especially with inhalers, it gets expensive. So some people we actually have like on a 90-day fill, but we'll do their inhalers on a 30-day fill to make it more affordable for them. But it makes your life so much simpler knowing that, hey, I know that this week I have to go and pick up my meds and all my meds will be ready for me. This is huge to me. Not because in 5 years I have to do it, but Medicare Part D. Annually you have to re-enroll in Medicare Part D. Some people think, well, it's really not that big a deal. It's a huge deal because the plans, the PBMs, change their coverage every year on what drugs are in and out of plan. So Medicare.gov is the website. When you go to get close to the enrollment period, either you or have somebody do it for you, go in there and you plug in your medications, pick your area, so it's our zip code, and then you can pick as many pharmacies as you want to compare it to in there and run this. And they will give you basically all the insurance plans in our area. It tells you what it's going to cost you per month for that insurance. It's going to what your co-pays are going to be, and what, based on your medication list, what your out-of-pocket expense will be for the year. I finally convinced one patient to do that. He was buying his meds in Canada. He looked at this and he said, well, he delayed, he dragged his feet, and finally this last year I sat down and we did it. He's spending less money this year than he was buying his meds from Canada. So it can change. And it comes down to that fact too, where I said that we can change drugs. We can look at it and say, again, I don't even care if you're our patient. You can stop in and see us. We will do this for you. I can still write a note to the doctor and say, hey, you know, this would be cheaper for them if they switched to this drug instead. You know, one case for us is Xarelto and Eliquis. Not totally interchangeable, but cardiology says for most patients they're okay with whichever one is cheapest for the patient. They're both blood thinners. They both do the same job. A little higher side effects with Xarelto, but not significant. But if it saves you hundreds of dollars a year, it's worth it. That comes to community care. This really is my pride and joy program. When I came here, this was one thing I asked administration. There's a program called the 340B program, which is an offshoot of a VA program years ago. It allows certain types of facilities, and we're one of them, to purchase drugs at a government-dictated price that's tremendously discounted. I said, I want to use this for patients. And at that time, Sarah Gustafson was the financial officer, and she's like, that's what the plan is for. It is. I could cite multiple organizations that don't use it necessarily. And I'm just gonna say they're legitimate uses what they use it for, but they don't use it to discount to patients. I truly think we are the only site in Minnesota that is discounting this dramatically. We're one of the few in the nation that's discounting this dramatically. I actually spoke to 3 pharmacists from, I want to say it was Utah, who started a program for diabetes patients. I copied their program, and I was fortunate they did an audit in our system, and I was fortunate to talk to them and say, how did you set this up? And they were very instrumental to help me do this. If you're at 300% of the poverty level or less, and right now, our sheets say, I think, $45,000 approximately for one person. And then I want to say it's $15,000 for each other member of your family. Adds to it, so $60,000 for 2. If you're at that, and you use our clinic provider, so you're seeing one of our physicians, nurse practitioners, PAs in the clinic, and they are charting electronically in our chart, it becomes eligible. And the key part there is 2 key parts there. It's got to be charted in our chart. If I'm audited by this program, I have to prove that there's a record, and our provider is the primary care provider. Fairview is using us as a demo program. We're also doing referrals. So if you see our provider, but you're going to the Twin Cities, Duluth, or somewhere else to a specialist, we actually can qualify that specialist, but there's certain rules I have to follow to make that work too. But we are making it work, and Fairview, like I said, is holding us up to see how well they can do it and expand it out. Providers can qualify you upon the initial visit, and we do it for sometimes too. We'll call over and ask the provider, hey, this patient looks like a perfect person. We want to qualify them, so we can do it for 30 days. I don't want to be that person making the decision. I don't want to look like I have a financial interest in it, so our pharmacy does not make the decision. We leave it up to the provider. If it's a hospitalized patient, we leave it up to the social worker and the physician to document it and tell us they qualify or need help. And that's really legitimate, just so somebody come back and say you're playing favoritism or you're saving money for somebody that you know. I don't care who you are. I really don't. I just want to, I'm cheap. You're going to see this. Last year, we provided approximately $1 million in savings on this program. The big complaint nowadays is price of medication, and you hear price of insulin for patients. This is one reason I may have left Crosby. We were charging our own employees $300 for insulin. We could buy it under this program and sell it to them for $20. We charge most patients, diabetics that qualify, $21 a month or $41 for 3 months. Inhalers, we charge them similar prices. Might be a little higher depending on the inhaler, but we do pass our savings on to the patients because that's what this program is out there for, and that's why we want to keep it going. So it's huge. It's a money, and again, I'm cheap. The biggest benefit that we see goes to diabetics, and the other patients are COPD or asthma patients with inhalers. That's where we're seeing our major savings. And again, if you meet the qualifications, see us, because we really want to utilize this program to its maximum. I want to be at $2 million within 2 years in the program. And you can look and say that we're losing, we're not making profit on the money, but we don't care. The incentive to the community is so huge to keep people healthy that it matters more to us than worrying about a profit, and the administration feels that same way. The kicker of it is, it's not a free program, but it's reduced cost. So we're not going to give you the meds for free, but we are going to charge you a lot less. Downside is if you got a deductible, it doesn't count against your deductible for your insurance, which you can actually, we could give you a receipt that shows what you paid. You can turn that into your insurance company, and they may or may not count that as towards your deductible. And speaking of deductibles, the donut hole, in theory, goes away. I think this is the last year of the donut hole, 2019, unless Congress mucks it up worse yet. But 2019 was slated to be the last year of the donut hole. So we'll see what happens next year with costs, but it's hopefully. So you talk PBMs. I put it on here just as insurance companies. But insurance companies aren't necessarily the person to be mad at. They take your money, they insure you. They actually deal with what's called a PBM, or a pharmacy benefit manager. That's this little, it's not even little business, it's this huge business that sits between the insurance company and the providers and determines what's going to happen. They negotiate with the drug companies to set the prices for the drugs for the insurance company. They get, I struggle with this word, rebates. I call it graft, I call it kickbacks, but they do get a rebate to get a drug on formulary. People are very familiar with EpiPen. When EpiPens were in the news because of the price increase, people don't realize that some of the PBMs were getting $200 of the cost of that EpiPen. So a middleman was collecting $200, and each step of the way, there's money. We made $7 on an EpiPen, and they made $200. It's like, I struggle with that one. I really do. So the PBMs, There's been local legislation passed in the state, and actually it's passed, it's being worked on, and at the federal level to make the PBMs transparent. We want to see what are the rebates? How much are they getting? You know, I get it, they serve a purpose, but we need to know how much money they are actually collecting that's coming out of your pocket. The proposal from HHS Secretary was that rebate money needs to be passed on to the Medicare recipients. That's who needs to get that money, not the PBM. There's a good movement in that way, and I think it's going to cut costs, but it's going to be slow. But that part is coming. I was never a fan of, I don't want to call it socialized medicine because I don't want to, almost like I would love a single payer. I would like one insurance company across the country, because we spend so much time all day long on the telephone talking to various insurance companies. If there was just one number to call, one formulary, one set of guidelines, that each one has their own and it's based on what drugs they cover. Controlled substances, if anybody here is on a controlled substance, you know this last year, it got nuts. And I get it, we do have an opioid crisis. My background primarily initially was hospice medication. I worked a hospice program. That's a group of people that they need these medications. They need pain meds. We as pharmacists could escalate the doses for the patients and keep them comfortable. I saw patients taking unbelievable amounts of narcotics, and it kept their pain away, and people say they can't be on that much. Oh no, pain is a very potent respiratory driver, and people will function on it. You do build up tolerance to it. Tolerance is a huge thing with opioids. That's why they're really not the greatest drug to treat chronic pain. You build up tolerance within a week. So if your dose of an opioid hasn't increased over time, you've already got tolerance. It's probably not doing anything for you. They are really not a long-term solution to pain. They are a 3-day thing, in my opinion, unless you're really at the mercy of having an ongoing cancer where you've got continual growth of a tumor impacting other areas. So opioid crisis, we have one. I'm a fan of getting people off of them. They are destroyers of lives. I mean, I'm not going to say they're not, because people that abuse them to get high. Most patients that are taking them don't get high. They use them to plug receptors and keep themselves from going through withdrawal. That's the biggest problem. You stop taking them, you go through withdrawal, and then you have to seek out other narcotics. They can be tapered off, and I'm a fan of working with people to get them off narcotics. Over-the-counter meds, are they safe? Maybe. There's a big push by insurance companies to get meds pushed over the counter because then they don't have to cover them. I look at omeprazole, Prilosec, as being a drug that's available over the counter. Is it a safe drug? For 14 days of use, it's a really safe drug. For 6 years of use, maybe not so much. For my 85-year-old mother, probably not so much. It's tough on the bones, it's tough on the kidneys. Ranitidine, old drug, is, and I'll admit, it may not be as effective for patients. I'm a fan of, there are people that need the basically omeprazole on board. However, you don't need it every day possibly. If you can use ranitidine for most of your day, take that every day and take omeprazole every third day or something, you decrease the side effect risk. One big concern with that drug, that class of drugs, was Alzheimer's. It's still out there, it's still on the internet that these cause Alzheimer's. That's been disproven, that's not true. Days supply, I could group that in a couple of categories. Most people, we try to ask them if their insurance will let you get 90-day supply, because people are more compliant with your medications if you take a 90-day supply at a time. You're more likely not to say, oh, I ran out, I forgot to fill it, I'm not going to go and get it again, or I'll get it whatever I can. With 90-day supply, you're more than likely to keep taking that medication. Medication synchronization, that same plan we have too, where if you fill it, and we actually track it. We actually see on our screen how far behind you are. Like, have you not been taking this? Insurance companies dog us for this. We actually get dinged after the fact if you don't take your medications right, which I don't consider fair. They call it DIR fees, direct and indirect reimbursement. Caremark will take money away from us if you don't take your medications, which is really nice. I had one patient who had a couple relatives die, happened to be on the same medications he was on. He got their meds, and it saved him a ton of money. I mean, I'm not going to fault him because he saved money by doing this. We got dinged on him alone for 4 months because he was taking a relative's meds, and there's no place on their box to check that here's why he was doing it. So I'm not a fan of insurance companies. Paying cash, this was a big change this last year. We were not supposed to tell you what the cash price was. We couldn't offer that up because that's a super secret thing that insurance companies don't want you paying cash when it might be cheaper than what your prescription is. We could actually have contracts terminated because of that. If you told a patient, here's the cash price, and it's $6, and their copay amount was $10, we were supposed to charge you to $10. That's stupid. So we have never done that. It's actually been pushed back now from the legislative level to say that we can tell you what the cash price is. Sometimes the cash price can be cheaper than your insurance price. So we always try to look at that and ask your pharmacist that. Ask him, is the cash price any less? Because there are times when it can be tremendous savings to you. It seems weird. You would think you would get that automatically, but it's not the way the insurance companies prime the system. This has been huge in the news lately. If you've seen the drug recalls, we've had a lot of blood pressure medications recalled, and the raw ingredients were made in China or India. I had actually one patient stop in and say, I want to make sure I don't get any of my meds from China or India. Guess what? I can't do that. Teva, one of the biggest pharmaceutical generic manufacturers in the world, based out of Israel, has plants in the United States, buys some of the raw ingredients from China or India. Nobody knows that. It's not tracked anywhere, so we don't know where the raw ingredients came from. You talk about government. This is the FDA really falling flat on their faces. This particular case was FDA inspectors were in the plant, noted that there were irregularities in the chemical composition of the product. And they sent it back to the state side and they said, there's something wrong here. We don't know what it is, but something's not right. They recommended that a letter be written, and the letter ends up making it so the manufacturer cannot introduce product anywhere else. Somebody up the food chain turned that off and nixed that, and so they were still able to keep making the product and basically contaminating the world. So the FDA needs, and I get it, they're spread out around the world, they have to meet plants, and guess what? People will cut corners any way they can. If the inspector's there on site, they're going to do things properly. If they're not there on site, they're not. Again, this plant had falsified records. They had them dead to rights, but still, it happens. So can you say I want to buy my drugs only from a U.S. company? You can say it all you want. I can't even tell you exactly where the drug came from. I'd like to be able to say I can. We count on intermediaries to do that for us, but it doesn't always work. The question was, should I take a specific brand name versus a generic? And I've gone through several, in the 4 years, pharmacists with me. The inpatient has stolen several away from me. But right now it's Jake and I, and we are both of the same thought pattern. I don't switch brands unless I have to. We keep the same generic maker on the shelf. An example of that's not Synthroid per se, but switching. It was Antofte called me and had a patient who drug levels didn't match up. And she's like, why is this TSH level changing? Dose hasn't changed, why? I said, where are they getting their drugs filled? And she looked up, she said, Walgreens. I called Walgreens and said, what manufacturer did you use? And they had changed manufacturers 3 times on that patient because they buy based on cheapest cost. Thrifty Drug buys on cheapest cost. I buy levothyroxine based on, I only stock one brand. Warfarin, I stock Coumadin or Jantoven, I don't switch. They're 2 very critical medications that have a very narrow therapeutic range. So the same brand. I don't think it has to be Synthroid, but you don't want to change brands every month because each drug is allowed to be from 90% to 100% of the stated potency. So drug A could be 90%, drug B could be 110%. You now have a 20% difference, although it's the same drug, in theory. Creon, lipase, it's a enzyme, was one of the biggest market failures in that. People could never, the generics never worked for people. And this was back in the 80s, and they could never figure out why. Their product contained 30 to 40% more than the stated potency on the label, so that you'd have to take that much more of an alternative product just to get the same amount of drug. So I'm okay with, I love generic. There's not a generic out there I say don't, but I'm not a fan of switching products. I had a patient, one of our employees came to me and she said her husband has had difficulty. He wanted brand name only of a couple drugs, and I said, it's going to be expensive. But I said, if we promise that we won't change. And we actually put labels on profiles. This NDC for this patient, because they don't want to switch and we don't want to switch them. So it can be done. Any pharmacy can do it. They might not like it, but they can do it. And the drug question of the year, Shingrix. I get asked this question multiple times every day. When they launched it, life was good. We had 60 doses on hand. We were getting it on a regular basis. And suddenly this thing just blossomed. The providers pushing it, the drug companies selling it on TV so immensely. The demand for this drug is 800% higher than the company anticipated. Fairview, I was on a conference call at Fairview today, is 4,000 doses in the hole in the Twin Cities. They have 4,000 patients that have received their first dose and need their second dose. We got added to their allocation today. Fairview's tried to argue, can we get higher allocations? And it's who's the big fish in the pond. Walgreens is probably a bigger fish in the pond than Fairview because they're nationwide. We, as Grand Itasca, we're not even a minnow in that stream. I'm a piece of algae. I have back orders. I have 100 doses back ordered through my wholesaler that in theory I might get 10 doses next week. I thought I was getting 10 doses last week. I didn't get them, so I'm hoping 10 doses. The company, you can sign up for direct shipments from them. I might get 2 doses from them. And then once I get my 2 doses, I drop to the bottom of the list again. I have to work my way back up again. So Shingrix will not be available truly till 2020. And I don't know, I know they had 1 batch fail. I'm curious if they had more than 1 batch fail and that loss of production set them back so far. Because it doesn't make sense. They had an anticipation, they had a market plan. I think they've had more than 1 batch fail and then it's pushed them that far back. They don't say, they don't have to say. The CDC is saying, no, we're going to keep going. Ideally, you're supposed to get the second shot at month 2 or between month 2 and month 6. The CDC is saying, basically, we're going to punt. We are going to let you get your next dose whenever it's available. They don't want you to start over again. We're not going to be starting people from scratch. We're going to just give the second dose whenever we can give it to you. Why Medicare doesn't pay for Shingrix is beyond me. The cost savings would be so much better for the country to pay the price of the injection and prevent shingles than the treatment for it, the hospitalizations for it. It's crazy, and I don't know where their money crunchers get into this and don't cover that. I don't know why don't they cover tetanus? You know, I tell everybody I can, I say, get your tetanus shot and your Shingrix before you turn 65. It's paid for 100%. Once you become Medicare eligible, they don't cover it. And so out-of-pockets have ranged from Shingrix to $0. I've had some people that have no copay, $250, I think the worst was. They weren't paying for any, but that again could have been the deductible phase, so they weren't beginning of the year. But if you get it when you're 64, there's no out-of-pocket for it. Tetanus. I have actually, I wish Debbie was, I don't think Debbie has seen, I've seen somebody die from tetanus and rabies. When I was first starting out, I worked at University Hospital, University of Minnesota, and almost at the same time we had a patient on 2 different wards there. One was dying from tetanus, one was dying from rabies. And to see somebody go through that is horrid. It's like, get the tetanus shot. It's super effective. If you're bit by a rabid animal or think you are, get the rabies shot. I would not wish that on anybody. Generics. I'm a fan of generics. 2 launches this year that are huge if you're asthmatic or if you've got chronic pain. Advair went generic last week. I didn't know it was going generic this quick. 2 companies launched their generics. So what that means, 6 months from now it'll drop in price. So it should get cheaper. Lyrica, I don't know if anybody's taking Lyrica for chronic pain. That was supposed to go generic over a year ago. Started in England, they got a court order to stop it, and basically they held it back in the US too. It is slated to go this summer generic, which will drive that cost down in December. 6 months later is when the cost really drops, so it should get cheap. And I'm a fan of generics. I mean, I will say that. Ask questions. I mean, really. Not on Mondays, though. Mondays are a heck day in a pharmacy. Because everybody realizes over the weekend they're out of their drugs, so they call them all in. So every pharmacy in town here is going to tell you Mondays are their busiest day. I am self-reported as a fiscally conservative individual. My wife says that's cheap. I'm okay with that. I come from good stock. My family, my dad and my uncle were cheap. And most pharmacies want to say, you know, we want to make sure you leave with a positive experience. Jerry can probably tell you that there may be a rumor that I pick on patients. I don't know that that's true. It's not personal.
We pick on you, Dave.
Well, you do.
I do.
Thank you.